The psychology of always needing to be right isn't a fixed personality trait. It's a living, breathing self-defense system, a constant inner alarm that turns ordinary conversations into survival games. The moment another perspective appears, the brain doesn't read it as information. It reads it as danger. Not danger to the topic, danger to the person's identity. And instead of processing facts, the nervous system flips into fight or flight, where the fastest way to calm down is to dominate the exchange and force reality back into something controllable. This dynamic runs on a loop. The less secure someone feels inside, the louder they become outside. Every time they win an argument, they get a brief shot of relief, a small dopamine hit, a temporary feeling of power, clarity, and safety. But it fades quickly because it never fixed the real problem. So the brain goes hunting again. Another debate, another correction, another moment where someone else must be wrong so this person can finally breathe. Over time, the need to be right becomes destructive fuel that burns through relationships. The person becomes addicted not to truth, but to victory. Empathy and curiosity shrink. Listening becomes impossible, and every connection becomes a zero-sum game. For them to feel stable, someone else has to lose. This isn't just stubbornness. It's a frantic escape from vulnerability, where every argument is an attempt to patch cracks in self-worth by breaking someone else's certainty first. You've probably met someone like this. Maybe they're the person who interrupts you before you finish your sentence. The person who turns a casual comment into a courtroom trial. The person who corrects tiny details that don't matter, not because they love precision, but because being right makes them feel safe. And the strange thing is, they often look confident, sometimes even arrogant. But if you listen carefully, the emotional energy behind their words feels like fear. Because at its core, the need to be right is usually not about intelligence. It's about regulation. It's about how a person handles discomfort, uncertainty, shame, and threat. For many people, being wrong doesn't feel like, I made a mistake. It feels like, I am a mistake. And that emotional equation changes everything. Let's slow it down and look at what's happening inside the brain. In a healthy conversation, disagreement is data. It's neutral. It's something the mind can explore without feeling personally attacked. But in a person who always needs to be right, disagreement triggers the same circuits that respond to rejection, humiliation, or loss of control. The body tightens, the voice speeds up, the mind becomes sharp, focused, ruthless. They start searching for loopholes, weaknesses, contradictions. Not because they want truth, but because the nervous system wants safety. This is why these arguments can feel strangely intense. You might be talking about something small, a movie, a policy, a memory, a plan, and suddenly the energy shifts. The other person is no longer discussing. They're fighting. Their eyes lock in. Their language becomes absolute. They speak in sentences that leave no room for nuance. That's not how it works. You're wrong. It's obvious. Everyone knows. They're trying to shut the world into one solid shape, because uncertainty feels like freefall. And the harder you push back, the more their brain interprets it as escalating threat. Now here's a crucial point. The need to be right is often a coping strategy that used to work. It's not random. It's learned. Somewhere in their life, being wrong may have been punished through shame, ridicule, control, or emotional neglect. They might have grown up in an environment where mistakes weren't treated as part of learning, but as evidence of incompetence. Or they lived in a system where the only way to earn respect was to be correct, impressive, untouchable. For a child like that, the mind builds a rule. If I'm wrong, I'm unsafe. So later in life, the adult doesn't just defend opinions. They defend their entire nervous system from collapse. That's why the behavior can look irrational. They argue even when the stakes are zero. They refuse to admit small errors. They shift the conversation away from the original point. They bring up unrelated facts. They change definitions mid-debate. They attack your wording instead of your message. And when you prove them wrong, they don't relax. They escalate. Because the goal was never clarity. The goal was survival. This also explains why many people who always need to be right struggle with apologizing. An apology to them isn't a social repair tool. It feels like surrender, like losing status, like stepping into weakness. Their mind imagines the apology will be used against them later. So instead of saying, "You're right, I misunderstood," they say things like, "That's not what I meant," or "You took it wrong," or "Fine, whatever," or "We're not talking about that." Even when they technically agree, they do it in a way that protects their pride. Because pride is the armor holding their identity together. But what's underneath that armor? Often it's shame. Not obvious shame. Not someone who looks insecure on the surface. More like a hidden, persistent feeling. If people see the real me, I'll be dismissed. For a shame-driven mind, being wrong is exposure. It's like the mask slipping. And exposure feels dangerous. So instead of risking that, they go into performance mode. They become the smart one, the logical one, the realist. They weaponize rationality. They talk like a courtroom attorney. They demand evidence from you while ignoring emotional context. They focus on facts when feelings are the point. They may even mock emotions as weakness. And this is where it gets tricky, because they might actually be intelligent. They might even be correct sometimes. But the psychological issue isn't whether they're right. The issue is why they need to be right and what it costs everyone around them. Let's look at real-life examples. Imagine a couple arguing about something simple, the tone of a message. One person says, "When you replied like that, I felt dismissed." And instead of addressing the feeling, the other person goes, "No, I didn't dismiss you. That's not what dismissal means. You're being dramatic." In that moment, they're not protecting the relationship. They're protecting their self-image. Because admitting, "Yes, I sounded cold," would mean admitting fault, which their nervous system experiences as weakness. So they choose being right over being close. Or think about a workplace situation. A coworker makes a suggestion in a meeting. The always right person responds instantly, "That won't work." Not, "Let's explore it." Not, "Interesting point." Just rejection. Then they explain why in great detail, often with a superior tone. Sometimes they do this even if the idea was good. Not because they hate the idea, but because letting someone else lead feels like losing control. And control is their drug. Or consider a friend group. Someone tells a story. "I remember we went there in 2019, and the person who needs to be right says, 'No, it was 2018. I remember because..." And suddenly the story is dead. The mood changes. Everyone feels corrected, reduced, managed. The correction wasn't needed, but the nervous system demanded it. So what makes this need so addictive? Because being right gives a temporary emotional payoff, creates a feeling of dominance, creates certainty, pushes away ambiguity. It triggers the brain's reward system, not because truth is rewarding, but because control is. And once the brain learns control reduces anxiety, it repeats the behavior. This is why some people become argument machines. Their mind is always scanning for errors, always anticipating disagreement, always preparing counterpoints. Even when nobody is fighting them, they imagine future fights and rehearse them internally. They can't rest, because rest would require vulnerability, the ability to not know, to not control, to not defend. And vulnerability is exactly what they're avoiding. Another layer here is identity fusion. When a person fuses their identity with their opinions, their beliefs stop being ideas and become extensions of the self. So if you challenge their belief, you're not challenging a thought. You're challenging who they are. And that's why these arguments can become personal so fast. You might say, "I don't think that strategy works." They hear, "You're incompetent." You might say, "I see it differently." They hear, "You're ignorant." You might say, "Maybe we should reconsider." They hear, "You don't deserve authority." So they respond with intensity because the threat feels intense. This often connects to perfectionism. Perfectionism is not the desire to be excellent. is the fear of being flawed. Perfectionists don't chase success. They run from shame. And one way to run from shame is to never admit you're wrong. Because wrongness equals flaw. And flaw equals rejection. But there's also a social status component. In some environments, being right becomes the currency of respect. People learn that the fastest way to gain power is to look correct, confident, unshakable. So they create a persona, the one who knows, the one who doesn't doubt, the one who sees through nonsense. But here's the problem. Certainty can be a mask, and it can also be a prison. Because if your self-worth depends on being right, then you can never evolve. You can never explore. You can never truly learn because learning requires being wrong at the beginning. So the person becomes emotionally stuck. They might read books, watch debates, collect facts, but their mind isn't learning. It's collecting ammunition. Knowledge becomes weaponry, not wisdom. And the more they win, the lonelier they become, because people stop trying. Friends stop sharing opinions. Partners stop opening up. Coworkers avoid brainstorming. Conversations become shallow, careful, defensive. Not because everyone else is weak, but because the always right person makes it unsafe to be human. Now let's get deeper. What happens inside the relationship dynamic when someone always needs to be right? A relationship survives on emotional safety. The feeling that you can speak, make mistakes, be imperfect, and still be respected. But a person who always needs to be right often creates a hidden hierarchy. There's one mind that decides reality, and one mind that must adapt. That creates a power imbalance. And over time, the other person starts doubting themselves. They second guess. They stop trusting their own memory. They apologize for things that weren't wrong. They become smaller, not because they're weak, but because constantly being corrected trains the brain into submission. And the always right person might not even notice. They might think they're helping. They might call it honesty, logic, clarity. But the effect is emotional erosion. This is why these people often say, everyone is so sensitive, or people can't handle truth, or I'm just direct. But directness without empathy is not honesty. It's control. So how do we distinguish between someone who values truth and someone who needs to be right? A person who values truth can say, I might be wrong. Tell me more. That's a good point. I changed my mind. Let's figure it out together. A person who needs to be right struggles to say any of those sentences, because those sentences create vulnerability, and vulnerability triggers threat. Now, to be fair, the need to be right isn't always cruel. Sometimes it comes from anxiety, especially in people who feel easily overwhelmed. For them, certainty is grounding. Being right becomes a way to reduce chaos inside their head. If their inner world feels messy, they try to make the outer world clean and predictable. So they correct, they organize, they control, they debate, not because they enjoy conflict, but because conflict feels more tolerable than uncertainty. And if you've ever struggled with anxiety yourself, you understand that logic can feel like a life raft. But if you cling to logic like a weapon, you start drowning the people around you. So what can someone do if they recognize this pattern in themselves? The first step is to recognize what the urge really is. When you feel the impulse to correct someone, pause and ask, what am I protecting right now? Is this about truth or about my identity? Do I need to win or do I need to feel safe? That one moment of awareness breaks the automatic loop. Because the loop thrives on speed. It thrives on instant reaction. The faster you respond, the more controlled you feel. So slowing down is medicine. Another strategy is learning to tolerate the physical sensation of being wrong. Because the real challenge isn't intellectual, it's physiological. The heart might race. The face might get hot. The mind might feel pressure. There's a sensation of losing ground. That's your nervous system interpreting disagreement as threat. If you can stay present through that discomfort, you grow. A simple practice is this. When someone disagrees, say out loud, "That's interesting. I need a second to think." Not "you're wrong." Not "no." Just, "I need a second." That sentence protects both sides. It gives your nervous system time to calm down. and it signals respect. Another powerful shift is replacing dominance with curiosity. Curiosity is the opposite of defensiveness. Curiosity says, I can handle complexity. Defensiveness says, I need certainty right now. So practice asking questions that open instead of close. What makes you see it that way? What experience led you to that? What part matters most to you here? When you ask questions, you stop fighting reality. You start exploring it. Also, train yourself to separate mistakes from identity. A mistake is an event. It's not a verdict. If being wrong triggers shame, your brain will avoid it at all costs. So you need a new internal rule. Being wrong means I'm learning. Being corrected means I'm growing. Changing my mind means I'm strong. Because strength isn't being right. Strength is being flexible without collapsing. Now, what if you're dealing with someone who always needs to be right? This is where many people get trapped. They think, if I just explain better, they'll understand. But you're not arguing with logic. You're arguing with their nervous system, so pure reasoning often fails. Instead, you need to protect the emotional structure of the conversation. One approach is to stop playing the win-lose game. You can say, maybe you're right. I can see why you'd think that. Let's agree to disagree. Not because they're correct, but because you refuse to turn the conversation into a battlefield. Sometimes the most powerful boundary is refusing to fight. Another approach is naming the dynamic without attacking the person. For example, I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to feel understood. This conversation feels more like a debate than a connection. I want us to solve it, not prove who's right. That shifts the goal from dominance to relationship. But be realistic. If someone is deeply addicted to being right, they may not be ready to change. Because change requires admitting there's a problem, and that admission itself feels like losing. So in many cases, your job isn't to fix them. Your job is to decide what kind of relationship you want to have with them. Because constant correction is exhausting, and emotional exhaustion is a form of slow disconnection. Now let's end with the most important truth. People who always need to be right are not fighting you. They're fighting the feeling of being small, ashamed, powerless, or unsafe. They're fighting the fear that if they lose one argument, they'll lose their value. They're fighting an old wound that taught them wrong means rejected. And yes, their behavior can be harmful, but the core of it is a fragile inner world trying to stay stable. So the real healing starts when the person learns this. You don't need to win to be worthy. You don't need to dominate to be respected. You don't need to be right to be safe. Because the healthiest people aren't the ones who are always correct. They're the ones who can be wrong without falling apart. They can be challenged without turning it into war. They can hear a different perspective and stay open, grounded, human. So if you recognize this pattern in yourself, don't shame yourself for it. Shame will only strengthen the armor. Instead, treat it like a signal that your nervous system learned to survive through control. And now it's time to learn a new way, a way where you can be connected instead of defended, a way where you can be curious instead of reactive, a way where conversations become bridges again, not battlefields. And the next time you feel that impulse rise, that tightness in your chest, that urgency to correct, that need to prove, pause, breathe, and ask the most powerful question in psychology. Do I want to be right? Or do I want to be close? Because real strength is choosing closeness when your brain is begging for victory.